I'm Rolando.
And I'm Eddie Z.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals,
An original podcast
about unoriginality.
And this is episode 1 of our Nosferatu series. And today, this episode is going to focus on the original Nosferatu, the 1922 German horror silent film directed by F.W. Murnau. I'm super excited to talk about it because this is the first time we're talking about a silent film on the podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. I know this is it's been a while since we've done an older movie, older than the 1980s.
It actually has been a while to that very regard. Before we hop into it, had you guys seen this film before you did the research for this podcast?
I did this. I had to watch this in college.
Okay.
No much. I don't remember the context of what. I don't remember what class we saw it for, but I don't even remember if we saw the whole thing.
Eddie, what about you?
Oh no, I've never seen this film in its completion. I've only seen clips. People always took clips of this film and posted it for some particular reason.
And let me guess, the shadow play, right? Like the hands coming up usually.
Yeah,
I feel those are the most famous shots.
It's a film that I had seen when I was a lot younger. I've always kind of been obsessed with seeing all the greatest films of all time, and I don't know if you guys remember when IMDb the top 250 movies was really a thing in internet culture, at least if you were into movies. So I was pretty obsessed with checking all of those off. I saw Nosferatu at a really young age, and I did not appreciate it. It was just not for me. For me, silent films were Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton movies, and anything else was boring.
That's interesting, right? I mean, when you have sound and you grow up with sound, it becomes an important aspect of the filmmaking process. So
it absolutely does. Yeah, especially when you're younger.
Yeah, also that's true. How young are you talking?
Gosh, I'm talking maybe 14, 15, 16.
Oh, that's really young to be watching a silent movie.
It is.
I was in college. I think I must have been 18 or 19 when I saw it for the first time, and even then I didn't appreciate it.
Force.
And I was forced. Yeah, that's true. I was watching it for class.
That's true. Yeah, you didn't even want to. So, well, if you don't know what Nosferatu is, here is a brief summary of pretty much this 102-year-old film. So Thomas Hutter, he is a real estate agent in Germany, and he is sent by his employer, Knock, to Transylvania to finalize a property sale with the mysterious Count Orlok. Count Orlok, a vampire, buys a house in Germany and spreads death and plague as he travels there. And while Hutter discovers Orlok's true nature, his wife, Ellen, sacrifices herself to destroy Orlok by luring him into the sunlight, ending his reign of terror. If you haven't seen this film, I apologize for the spoilers, and yet it is 102 years old. Also, the plot, if you know kind of your classic vampire lore, should sound incredibly familiar, because Nosferatu was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, a property we have covered on this podcast before.
Correct, we have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great backstory with that too.
I really feel I'm only going to appreciate this movie by its history.
This movie was made in 1922. Historically, we need to think about two really important things, which is one, World War I just ended, and the Germans lost. But the other big thing is that the flu epidemic of 1918 had just occurred and also ravaged the citizens of many German small towns.
That's right, the Spanish flu, right? Because that's the one that we were comparing our epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much 100 years before COVID was the flu. And now the flu is still very much a thing. The flu is something that is still can be deadly for people. And when it first appeared in 1918, I mean, it was devastating. And so this idea of a plague coming into, a small town and pretty much getting rid of people one by one by one was something that was very present on the German people's minds. A little bit about the people who made this movie. There was a man who is actually credited as the makeup artist or the set designer in the beginning credits. It's Albin Grau. He actually was the producer and the person who was responsible for making this movie. He had a deep interest in the occult. He had a hand in this and wanting it to be this big movie. F.W. Murnau, he came from the art world because back then, a lot of people who went into film, they not only were people who worked on the stage, They were painters. They were poets. A lot of these people were the people who also helped invent the film language. F.W. Murnau's first film ever was an adaptation of a painting, which is one of my favorite things about him. You know, most people adapt novels or plays, but he adapted a freaking painting into a movie. So it shows you just how visual this man was. And he was homosexual. So you have these group of early 20th century, you know, people who are interested in the occult, people who are interested, who are queer, and who are just not, you know, kind of part of mainstream culture, especially in early 20th century Germany, making this movie. They had read the novel. They tried, by all accounts, to get in contact with Bram Stoker's estate, which is pretty much his wife. And they couldn't. They made this film for German audiences, for German people, right after World War I. It got circulated across the globe. And about 3 or so years later, after it's been showing, Bram Stoker's wife heard about it and was like, no fucking way somebody did this without asking my permission. Because she pretty much, you know, banking on that cash, like on that check. She was talking to Universal and stuff. And she got a really, really lofty sum when Universal eventually did buy it a couple of years later. Yeah. So she pretty much filed a lawsuit. She won, and she ordered all prints of Nosferatu to be destroyed.
Which is interesting they won because, I mean, they changed, I mean, not everything, but like, I feel like enough of it where you can argue it is a different thing altogether.
Are you sure? I really got the sense
they changed the names, right? The ending is very different from the original. You know, it takes place in Germany versus England. I mean, these are some major changes and stuff, right? And on top of that, Dracula brings people back to life as vampires. In Nosferatu, there is no instance of that.
Yes, and also this is the first time that a vampire is defeated by the sunlight. That's not in Dracula.
That is not in Dracula too, right? There, that is very much a Nosferatu creation, and one that actually has carried on ever since.
But think about the media, how, you know, think about that time period and not having availability of all that information or that media. So when you encounter Nosferatu, you're gonna take it as, oh, this is probably how the story is, you know, because you really don't have the availability to compare it to its original source.
Yeah,
you don't have like a podcast we have a podcast to listen to.
That's really important too, because it was the first adaptation of this novel, and she was like, this is terrible. This is nothing like what, you know, Bram Stoker wrote about. And she wanted, you know, whatever, kind of like if you were the person who first wanted to do something and somebody else did it before you, you would want like all evidence of that destroyed, maybe. So she was pissed. She won the rights. Dracula came out in America in 1931, not very long after. But you actually can see the influence, I think, of F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu on the production of Todd Browning's Dracula.
Which is ironic then, right? Because it's like, could Murnau sue now, being like, now you guys have infringed on my creativity?
Yeah, I wonder.
Dracula.
I think he just didn't want to get in trouble again. And by that time, he was actually working in America. And making some great American films until his untimely death, actually, I think by like 1930. He did not survive quite long. He died in a car crash. Yeah, I mean, a couple other things. Max Schreck, who plays Count Orlok, he designed himself. He designed the look himself. He was an accomplished theater actor, and he was, you know, very passionate about the way he wanted to portray this character. He was very much in character a lot of the time. Count Orlok is nothing like Count Dracula, right?
Yeah.
Count Dracula, I mean, he looks like a man. He dresses very nice. He looks like upper class society. He looks like a count.
When he comes to England.
When he comes to England, yes.
When he comes to England. When he was in Transylvania, he was of...
Which adaptation are you talking about?
The book.
Okay, so I've never read the book, but if we're talking about media representations, you know, Bela Lugosi is pretty much... the same outfit from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, not in the
novel and the Francis Ford Coppola film.
Yes, that's right. We also see that in the Francis Ford Coppola book.
But he is able to disguise himself as a human being, which then makes him the ultimate predator, because then he's able to, you know, pretty much his camouflage is excellent. Nobody can see through him. Mm-hmm. He can shapeshift, but still, like, he blends in and he is sexy and suave and all those things. Count Orlok is none of that.
No, maybe.
I mean, he looks like you think he might be sexy?
Yeah, there's a type. I have gone to enough gay bars to know that, like, that lurch type figure is very popular with some sect of men. So
I love learning that. That's so fun. Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that Max Schreck embodied this character, he embodied him like a rat, right? And rats are very present in this film. In this movie, he's not a man who is, secretly preying on people. He is very clearly a monster. Big difference between Dracula and Orlok that I think can't be, clearly stated enough, and something we'll come back to when we discuss this new remake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we talked about the story. I've given you some background. I want to hear, especially from Eddie in particular, what do we think about this movie?
Oh, Eddie, what did you think about this movie?
It was all right. It was all right. It was all right.
This is why we love Eddie, right? Because he's not the film guy. And
because
he's not the film guy.
I'm just like, oh, no sounds. Okay. And I'm like watching, I can take it from the artistic point of view, like appreciating, like I said, like I appreciate the history of it. Like I was made, and then it was asked to be destroyed, and then it was kept alive by these people like doing underground, movie club things. So I could appreciate all that little story there. But like when you watch it, and I'm watching it, and being kind of a lover of vampire lore, I'm like, oh, this is nice. This is okay. Then at some point I was just like making up my own what they were saying to each other.
You were very much
I was just like
pretending.
Yeah. So, but that's it. And would have I seen this on my own? No. This is because we're doing research for the podcast. But yeah, so that I'll leave it there.
I mean, I don't disagree with him. This is not a movie. I've had to see this twice already, and both times out of my own free will. Right? Like once for class and now once for this podcast. But I definitely appreciated more so the second viewing, right? As an adult, and someone who has now studied like filmmaking. Like there are scenes that do still sit with you and are still beautifully composed, right? A lot of the shadow play, most certainly there's a reason why there's such a longevity to this to Nosferatu, right? Because of that, like those clawed like fingers and stuff. Like, those scenes are forever engraved in cinematic history, right? And it's something that like you may not know that it's from this movie, but you've seen it before, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty iconic.
Yeah, well, Murnau was someone who, like I said, his first film he adapted a painting, so he was very much focused on composition. And if you look at each shot, I mean, practically, unless it's dialogue, where people are talking, the composition of this film is pretty outstanding. And I think that's why it's survived as long as it has in movie history. And it has developed a lot of the tropes that we come to know for horror, visual tropes.
Yeah.
The film, I think, deserves a lot of respect. It's not my favorite silent film. I don't even think it's my favorite German expressionist film. It's not my favorite F.W. Murnau film. But it is also incredibly impressive. If you try and put your mindset in, 1922 German people who are watching this, I'm sure many of those moments freaked people out, gave them jump scares, and probably gave people nightmares. I know a lot of people who saw this as children, and I think that if you were to see this as a child, or at least Count Orlok and the way he is menacing upon this woman, is horrifying. I also think that this movie shouldn't, if you can, be seen in a theater with a really nice print. Because if you guys watched that colorized version on Amazon, that's like, it looks terrible. I saw that as when I was rewatching it. I was like, oh my God, I hope nobody's watching this for the first time on this version.
Yeah, Eddie was. That's.
I think that lends itself, honestly. I think that, watching lower quality and this whole stupid colorized thing where in the 90s people thought it was a good idea to add color to black and white movies.
Yeah, I don't remember if the version I saw at school was colorized. I don't remember it being, because I remember thinking it's just like, did it look like this? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, though, interestingly enough, I made a short film where I use that kind of colorization thing. So it's just like, now in retrospect, I'm thinking it's just like, did I watch it like this? And like, did it like seep into my subconscious and influence me to make a movie like this? Where there was a lot, because the movie the one that I made, my short film, granted it was about sex, and Nosferatu is not about sex. There was a lot of shadow play, and there was about and the colorization was very much in there. So now I'm double thinking. It's like, oh, maybe I did watch the colorized version, and it did seep into me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that sex isn't a part of it, because it kind of does with Ellen. And, we said that this was an adaptation of Dracula, but I love how Murnau and Grau were just like, let's just ditch that whole like third part of the story and rewrite it. Because again, people who are interested in the occult, homosexual, just people who are queer overall, they were like, Christianity can't save the day here. Maybe they said it was stupid. Maybe they just were not interested in having a story that ended that way. So they were like, how about we have this woman, Ellen, decide to sacrifice herself? This idea of sacrifice is very occultish, but also just like the love that she has, and the fact that it's a woman who's standing forward and saying, hey, I'm going to be the one to stop this whole monster, since none of the men or anybody else in my life can really control the situation. Very different from Dracula, and a very interesting idea to kind of replace that ending with for their film.
Interesting that you keep thinking occult, because like I felt it felt more fairy tale-ish.
Oh, interesting. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like even the way, or at least the most recent print that I saw, right, which seemed very fairy book-like, right? The way the story was being unfolded seemed very much like a fairy tale, and even the way it ends, of which is just like the fair maiden made her sacrifice and stuff, right? Which is kind of harkened back into the new one when we talk about it. And I feel like similar. Remember when we watched The Haunting of Bly Manor, how like love broke the spell finally? It was true love that breaks the spell. Similar to this, it's true love. Like her love for her husband is so pure that she is the only one. She knows she's the only one who could stop this, because she finished reading the book, unlike he did, and she knew to break the spell was sunlight. And so she does make that sacrifice, and she does it because she doesn't want her village, her town, her city to be overcome with the plague and the evil that is Nosferatu.
Yeah, I like that read. I like the fairy tale aspect of it. I think also the idea of sacrifice is just something that people think is one of the most honorable things you can do as a person. That is like the true example. I don't know if you guys necessarily agree that sacrifice is the truest example of love.
I mean, the internet would agree with you, right? Because like, look at what they're doing with Luigi Mangione. They're treating him like a martyr.
That's true,
like,
Martin.
He had himself arrested to make a point, So
but she also just has a little bit, more like ownership of her life and of her decisions, and because she's Mina Harker essentially. She's also kind of Lucy. If Hooter is,
she is definitely both. Like they kind of conjoined them into one in this.
Yeah. Like if Knock is Renfield and Hooter is Jonathan Harker, then she's kind of a combination of them. But she's also she has more free will. She also has a mind a little bit of her own. I'm not trying to diss Mina Harker or anything. She's just not as susceptible.
Well, yeah, but keep in mind, like Bram Stoker's Dracula was also written during the Victorian age, right? And the book itself is such a story of that repressed sexuality that we have. Not in Nosferatu. It was exhibited more so in Dracula, but it's something that will get touched upon much more in Nosferatu.
Absolutely, and that's
the 2024 remake.
Yes, that's well observed of you too, because if the original Dracula is about kind of that repression, then here's kind of a little bit more ownership of it and utilizing it, to one's advantage.
Yeah, although I will say some of the scenes, like the ending, did seem a little on the sexual side, right? Like she kept grasping her bosom where her heart is, right? But it did seem like she was like kind of grabbing a hold of some meat. Not that she had much. What? Sorry. But what's it called? Yeah, she kept grasping like her bosom, and then the shadow play at the end, like when it comes up to her, right? It's going to the heart, but it also does seem like he's grabbing her tit.
It kind of does, yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, so again, sex kind of does at the end, is the thing that saves the day.
Well, and the penetration of the teeth into skin is a very sexual act almost, right? That's why vampirism is always so connected to sensualism and sexiness, right?
Erotic.
And erotic, yeah. It's because there is this vulnerability that you had to put yourself when you had to, like, when you give your neck to somebody, right? I'm so ticklish there, right? Like anytime Eddie tries to like kiss me there or bite me there, I'm always like laughing hysterically because I can't take it. So I don't think I would do well in one of these vampiric stories.
Stop, Dracula. Stop.
Tickles. Yeah. One last question I want to ask you guys, because recent criticisms of the film has brought this up, is that some people, again, this is right after World War I, it's definitely predating, but is it maybe also kind of predicting the way that Germany would go in the next couple of years? Some people have said that there is examples of anti-Semitism in it, with the way that Orlok is represented in this film, and the fact that he is a plague, like Jewish people were thought to be a plague amongst the German people. What do you guys think about this criticism?
An interesting criticism, but like it's more, I would say it's more making fun of the Romani people than it is of the Jewish people, right? Unless maybe there's like a certain sector of the Jewish Jewish people that is like of that area, of that region, right, of the mountains and stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm not that well versed in it, so I can't speak to it. But I definitely felt more like it was, and I mean, the Germans weren't kind to the Romani people either. They were part of that Holocaust as well.
Yeah, well, they definitely were looking for people to blame, especially in terms of their loss and the devastation that they had.
Were those feelings there already though?
I think so.
I know that because again, I'm not the most historically versed person, right? Like, I don't know. I know that like the rhetoric spewed by Hitler was what would spur that. Wow, Hitler. We really launched our podcast and we're starting to already talk about Hitler.
He's everywhere, I tell you. We can't escape this guy.
Nowadays, if we tell you 2025, yeah, probably.
Yeah. German Expressionists these films are really interesting to revisit too, because they kind of, you could see it boiling, you could see it forming, and you could see even the early representations and examples that occur in those films.
Yeah.
I don't think, F.W. Murnau escaped. He came to America. Like, he was not someone who was interested in that, let's say. I can't really say for sure.
No, yeah, but, if he was gay, he would have been taken to those concentration camps too.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that the way that they decided to represent this monster. Some people, I think that for people to look at Count Orlok and see a Jewish people, I think that's actually pretty anti-Semitic.
You think it's anti-Semitic to call it out?
They're like, it's clearly based on a Jewish person. Yeah, I never thought this way.
Right. And yeah, I don't see. If anything, I think I would say the new Nosferatu is more anti-Semitic than.
Interesting.
To be quite honest. Before we close off on this, I did want to call out one thing. You called out the beautiful cinematography and stuff. I disagree with you. And this is one critique that I had read about the original Nosferatu when it came out. Like, some of the reception was kind of lukewarm at best because it was so brightly lit. It did not feel scary, and I agree with that. It did not have that sense of impending doom, right? And I get it. Like, this was like shot on a small budget. This was like not a big budget movie.
Yeah.
And film is so light is so integral to film back then. Like, you cannot do you couldn't really do a lot of mood lighting, not on a shoestring budget, you know what I mean? So I understand where that critique comes from. I agree with it, but I don't know if that's necessarily that, they did what they could with what they had.
Absolutely.
Which is something that I would argue is something that is not done anymore, because I'm watching some of these new shows that are on like streaming services and stuff. And let me tell you, like, the new generation of video makers and filmmakers and stuff have forgotten how to light things, because everything is always just either flat or too dark, and it is driving me crazy. All right. I cannot watch this show, Tell Me Lies, anymore, because it is so literally underlit. It just drives me insane. I feel like I'm going blind. Like I have like a cataract or something over my eye.
I completely agree with you that films don't know how to be lit anymore. And it's interesting because I think lighting and the way that this new film is going to be a major talking point for the next episode. But I also think that light is just one of the things that is beautiful about this film. I think it's more so the mise en scène, arches, doorways, the set design and whatnot. I'm more interested in that than the exposure and the light. But I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree that it's a little too bright at times, but there's other stuff happening that I think is really, really beautiful. Eddie, does this change your mind on silent movies? Are you like, yeah, let's watch more silent movies?
No, but
how many silent movies have you seen?
Besides maybe a Charlie Chapman film.
Well, I think that's it for the original. Come back for the next episode where we are going to be talking about the new Robert Eggers 2024 remake of Nosferatu. So until next time,
stay original.